look at what one new skill or practice that you have learned in the last year since the start of this pandemic that you did not have before. Because that has been the good thing that has come from this. So if there's one good thing, and again, not minimizing all the awful things, is that we all have a new set of skills and practices that we did not have a year ago. So identify what yours is, because it's going to help you as you move forward in your career. Because what I know is this: it's the magic of daily changes that will make the biggest difference in the quality of your life.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. This is your host, Anushka Rajesh at peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Gregg Brown. Having worked with teams ranging from CEOs to frontline workers, associations, governments, Fortune 500 companies, NGOs, and everything in between, including prisoners and nuns, Gregg believes that even in the midst of challenging situations, we can look for the opportunities that are available to serve our organization and the planet. His interactive keynotes combine organizational psychology, behavioral science, change management, and talent development with a healthy dose of humor to help one create the best future of work. Gregg has also been featured nationally and internationally in numerous media outlets, written 2 books, and was often found on a plane heading to speak to diverse audiences on our beautiful planet. Now, he's speaking on screen instead of on stage. We're so happy and honored to have someone of his stature today on our interview series. Welcome, Gregg. We're thrilled to be talking to you today.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Likewise, the pleasure is absolutely ours. So, Gregg, diving right deep into the first question of our interview today, for the past 4 years, you've been a change leader, a keynote speaker, an author, and also a researcher at BeChangeReady Leadership. So, do tell us a little about the great work that you do there and about your phenomenal experience over the years.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so the last 4 years I've had my own business, and prior to that, I worked in various industries and sectors, and I started my career about 30 years ago as the team that opened the first wave of Starbucks stores in Canada, way back when I think there were 20 stores here in Canada. This is like 1989 or something. I'm dating myself. And then I wanted to do something, that created some change on the planet. And I ended up volunteering and working with people in jail, which was really fun because I'd never, known anybody that I had known be in prison. But it gave me an opportunity to really get an understanding of human psychology, how people functioned, under pressure and in those situations. And as I moved out of that, moved into the healthcare field and then the private sector, the thread that tied my work together was very much working with individuals, and it has been that way for 20 years, in the workplace, how to, increase our behavior, how to shift it, how to be more effective at our work. And I've always really focused on the people skills because I believe anybody, I can teach anybody to do a change management plan or a project plan or a recruitment plan. It's much harder to work with people to lead their teams from A to B. And that's what really interests me, are those skills that people get, shift how they work. And, my work has focused, I'd say, for 10 years on influencing and, leading and navigating that future of work and trying to, bring people along with us to make great change on our planet.
That's great. I mean, that's some phenomenal work you've done there, and you've had a holistic experience in several fields and sectors. And it's just wonderful how you contribute in making the planet better and more adaptive to change every day.
Thank you.
So, going on to the next question, Gregg. The hashtag that you associate yourself and your work with is hashtag BeChangeReady, and that is relevant now more than ever. So, as an expert, how would you really advise the leaders of tomorrow to navigate the future of work strategically and, in a decisive way, and especially in such a uncertain period?
Well, for the last year, I've been speaking so much on leading in a crisis because, for the first time in my lifetime anyway, the whole planet is, undergoing a similar crisis, regardless of what people think politically. There's clearly a crisis going on. You have to go to any healthcare facility to see that. Uh, and I think, the number one tip I can give to leaders that may be listening to this, especially HR leaders, and I come from HR, so I feel, affinity to talk to my peeps, people who I know and people who, who I've done similar work in the field. And I think the number one tip I can give people, and this is something I've had to practice as well. So when I share my experience and things that have worked, I've had to try them too, because I am not the perfect expert leader on the planet. I mean, I was asked yesterday in an interview, what one word would your team describe you as a leader? And I said, probably frustrating. People say encouraging, inspiring. I'm like, well, I think there's a little bit of this. So the thing I've had to work on has been very much the concept of mindset. And, there's been a lot of research out in the last number of years about mindset. And I've done a lot of my own research around neuroscience and brain science and not just how neurons function, but how the brain functions. And, what we've really learned is that, mindset is not a woo-woo term out there. It's a collection of neurons in your prefrontal cortex that help you decision make, problem solve throughout the day. And what we want to do is be able to program our mindset properly in the morning before we start our day to ensure that we're being as more efficient as we can. So let me give you a simple example of that. So where I live on the planet, which is Canada, which is different than India, I'm sure, is if it rains in the morning here, you'll often hear people say they'll get up in the morning and it's raining out. And you'll hear people say, oh, it's a lousy day out there. Well, if you're programming your brain as that's the first thing that you put in there when you get up in the morning and you're like, well, it's a lousy day, I can guarantee you're programming those neurons in your brain to start to pay attention to all the things that are going to validate that. And you're not going to have as good a day. Now, if it's raining outside, the other way to approach your day to program your neurons correctly is to go, it's a wet day outside, and to remove the emotion from your language. Because when you say it's a wet day outside, you're programming your brain to go, hey, a wet day, you're going to be in a better headspace and mindset to get into your day than if you'd said it was a bad day. And you'll be more efficient problem solving and decision making throughout your day. Now, it doesn't mean bad things won't happen, but what it does mean is you'll be able to handle them better. And, I've seen it at work where, managers or leaders walk around going, this is a crappy report. And, they'll get everyone excited. This is a disaster. This is terrible. This is, and everybody gets all riled up. And then when that happens, the cortisol floods our brain. We lose working memory. We don't think clearly. So we don't problem solve. So we want to ground people in reality. And when I hear things like that, I say, okay, so tell me what's wrong with this report. Oh, there's 4 errors. Well, that's not a disaster in my viewpoint. So it's really, I think it's really trying to de-escalate some of the language we use. Because when we use the right language in the morning to start our day, our mindset will be more efficient. Because I do believe this, how you start your day is how you live your day. And how you live your day is how you live your life.
Absolutely. Can't second you more on that. And that was such a lovely, easy to relate example that you provided our audience with, Greg. Thank you so much for that. And so it's basically you're saying it's changing and shifting mindsets and adopting a different perspective to look at situations in a factual way.
It is, and I think the other piece about that is it's not, burying negative things that are happening, because bad things happen. It's about getting into the negativity, but not spend too much time there, and then getting out of it. And it's about, it's about perspective, right? And perspective can be useful. We just want to be cautious when we use it. An example that we use here in North America, I hear frequently, which can be sort of insulting to people, but people will walk around, if you get a flat tire, let's say on the way to a meeting, which I've never had happen, knock on wood, people will say, oh, first world problems. Well, I agree. It's not hunger and poverty that, so many people on the planet are dealing with. And I'm not minimizing that in any case, in any sense. But for me, it's at that point of getting to a meeting, it is a problem and I need to handle it. And when someone says that, it minimizes my experience, which means I'm much less likely to engage with them in the change. And as leaders and HR professionals, people come to us often, and because we're the bridge builders, people think we're the people, and most of us are, and some aren't, and that's okay. You don't need to be a people person to be in HR. There's many functions within HR. There is this piece around, our job is to be bridge builders and to, facilitate communication between departments and teams, to contribute to business strategy and not just be a cost center. And I think that, if we model the behaviors we want leaders, to use, I think it really helps us in our workplaces.
Right, absolutely. Those are some really enlightening and valuable insights that you provided us, Gregg.
Thank you.
Yes, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Question. You said before that a certain skill set is any day preferred over, like plans, budget, and even frameworks in order to create the best work environments. So in that respect, are there certain basic skills that you think all leaders, just need to imbibe to adapt better to change?
Absolutely. What I say is, the budgets, the frameworks, the plans, all of those things are very important. Yet, it's our day-to-day interactions with others that are going to make the biggest difference in our career. And the skills I'm referring to, I think are there. I think a number one skill is very much related to remembering that when we want to influence people on change and to get them, onto our side of the bridge, and to build that bridge to get them engaged in the change we want them to do, is to really remember that the change happens in the mind of the other person. So it's not about us. Yes, I can tell you the benefits. Yes, I can tell you how great it's going to be for our company. Yet until I figure out what is it going to make you click. So whether it's sales, in sales, we want to say, get into the mind of your customer. In HR, we'll say, let's get into the mind of our change targets. What do they need to be, do, know, have, feel to get engaged in the change? I think that's one of them. I think probably one of the most important skills I'm seeing right now, that is, some of the research has been focusing on it for a number of years, but has become very, clear now, is the concept and skill of adaptability. Adaptability meaning having a wide range of access to behaviors, to skills, to resources, to deal with challenging situations. And I believe there's sort of three pieces of adaptability. One is our, cognitive flexibility. So that means, our brain being able to look at things from different points of view, being able to get out of black and white thinking to play in the gray area, being able to have discussions with people that maybe don't agree with you, being able to ask questions. I just did a recent post on LinkedIn and in my newsletter about how to change narrative in 2021. And in North America, as I'm sure you've seen on the news, there's been a lot of divisive politics going on. And we know that, that involve labeling and name calling. And the thing is, labeling and name calling doesn't work in organizations or with our families. And if you don't believe me, I always tell people, go home and start calling your partner or your spouse names and see how far you get. Or go to work and start insulting people and labeling them. It doesn't work at home or at work. It doesn't work in politics. And I do believe that we need to get more comfortable with having difficult conversations and playing in the gray area. So that's a cognitive flexibility, getting unstuck from our own beliefs. Some beliefs we need to keep because there is right or wrong, and I believe that. We have values that are good and bad. I agree with that. But most of the other stuff is gray area, and I think at work we need to, learn to play in that gray area a bit more and get out of black and white thinking. The other type of flexibility other than cognitive flexibility is dispositional flexibility, which is related to what I would say, is our ability to shift our attitude and our approach to, sometimes we need to be negative. If I'm a leader and all the crap is going on in my organization, I'm like, let's just be positive. People are going to think I'm out of touch. So there is this piece about, letting our disposition and having some flexibility about our attitude and approach. And the third piece is emotional flexibility. So if the first one's cognitive, which is about our brain, the second one's about more, say, our personality, our disposition. The third is more about our emotional flexibility, which is all about being able to manage worries, being able to manage other people's issues, not feeling like we have to problem solve everybody's other problems. Just listening can move people down that path of change. And the thing is, worries, and we all worry about things, but worries are really just made up stories. They're not real. So one of the pieces I will often recommend that's worked for me, and again, I only say things that's worked for me, is shift the concept of worry to the concept of risk. If this is really a risk, which you think something's going to happen, let's ask a few questions to manage the risk. How likely is that going to happen? What's the impact if it does happen? Is there anything we can do to prevent this from happening? And if it does happen, what's our contingency plan or our plan B? And I believe that if we remember that change happens in the mind of the other person, and if we, remember to be cognitively flexible, dispositionally, personality-wise flexible, and emotionally flexible, I believe, you can almost do anything. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, because Lord knows I'm not, but I think it make you more effective.
Wow.
Regardless of your job title. I believe that, leadership is not about a job title. Leadership is about your approach. I've worked with, receptionists and HR advisors who are amazing leaders. They can rope people to do anything. And I've worked with CEOs and HR leaders that couldn't get anybody to do anything. And that to me is what leadership's about. It's not the job title.
Absolutely. That was so well explained by you, Greg. Cognitive, dispositional, and emotional flexibility. I'm sure it's going to be etched in our audience's minds as much as
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree with you that it's all about flexibility in change management and being agile and resilient and moving forward with time. So it's all about, it's in the mind, and it's just navigating your way through turbulent times.
Absolutely. And I write more on that. If people want to go to my website at www.greggbrown.ca, not .com, .ca, because I'm Canadian. And it's greggbrown.ca. There's some articles there that I've written on that people can read a bit more about. So
I'm sure our audience are going to avail that. And I think personally, I'm going to check that out as well.
Oh,
so
good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that question. It's a good question.
Thank you. So going on to the next question, Greg, shifting gears a little and coming to talent development. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, how really has talent development changed over the years, and what's your advice for millennial leaders?
So, I started in talent development back in 1993, and back then we were all trainers, and by that I mean, people assumed that performance improvement and productivity improvement at work was and any problem at work would be solved by having a training session. I'd get calls, I hate my manager. Can you come and do a workshop on that? And of course, just like how, the HR profession has changed from being, HR many years ago was just, I'm having trouble with my staff. Can you come and fire them? And then HR, we'd trot over and discipline the staff. HR has evolved to be much more consultative and collaborative. We're a business partners now. We want to coach people to do the work themselves. We want to be sitting at the strategy table and at the senior executive table and at the C-suite. It's really evolved. And I believe talent development has shifted as well. The shift for me that I have seen in my world, and it may be different for people around the planet, but certainly in the professional associations that I'm a member of, I've seen the evolution, is we've really moved away from, the concept of I'm just going to go in and teach everybody everything. Because, of course, the concept of workplace training and education comes from teaching. And the difference between education in an institution versus workplace productivity, which is talent development, developing our talent to take on different roles, do different pieces of work, is that we're asking for performance improvement. We're asking for behavior change. Education and higher institutions or in school isn't necessarily looking at behavior change. I mean, some basic skills, yes, but they're learning knowledge and education, which is valuable. And so the evolution I've seen is a much more, I would say, educated and knowledgeable talent development people who are looking at what does the learner need to know to do their job well? How do they need to know it? How can I give it to them in a multitude of ways that they can take it in with different learn domains? How can I get them to practice it in the sessions? Are there some pieces that we could do online or virtually? And I don't believe everything translates well online. I mean, some things work well online, but leadership development, that happens much better, I believe, in a classroom-based setting with other people, because I can't practice leadership unless it's with a group of people. Virtually we can do it, but it's leading virtual teams, which is a different concept as well. So I think that evolution of being much more learner focused on what are people actually going to learn at the end of the session. And the people that are procuring this, I believe, so it might be the HR manager, it might be the advisor, it might be the head of learning and development, the head of talent, the chief learning officer. It could be, a variety of people. They're really that business partner, I don't say like a learning business partner that is looking at what does that area need to know to do their job better versus let's pull this book off the shelf and train them this. I call that sort of the guru way of training where, the latest let's go train everybody on this. Well, I want to know what the shift is going to be, either up here or physically, or how it's going to make, if I'm spending the money to bring, someone like myself in, who's not that cheap anymore, it's not just the cost of bringing me in and flying me somewhere. It is the cost of putting 100 or 30 or 20 or 10, depending on the size of the group, those people away from their desks into the room. So I think we have a much more knowledgeable workforce that's procuring this. And I think it's much more learner focused. Now, your second question was, what's advice for millennials? Well, the advice I'd give to millennial leaders is the advice I'd give to any leader, first off. So one thing I will say, having done some research on different generations, is I believe that when we label leaders certain topics like millennial leaders, baby boomers, I'm Gen X, luckily still I can say I'm not a baby boomer, is that when we label people, which is sort of what I was saying before, I think it can take away the diversity that they have. And I know when we do personality profiles like DISC or Myers-Briggs or any of those, we say, you're a D, you're a red, you're a gold, or whatever. And it's not meant to pigeonhole or label, but we need to talk sometimes in generalizations to make a point. But for millennial leaders, what I would say is this, and I've worked with people like this. I have worked with millennials who still read hardcover books. And I have worked with baby boomers who will not put down electronic copies of their Kindle. So I think it's about, for all of us on the leadership spectrum, is not making assumptions about how people work because of their age. And I think that's a big part. So I sort of wanted to mention that because I love the question. I think it's an important one. And I think the only difference between millennial leaders and older leaders is the same as it would be 20 years ago or 30 years ago, is the amount of experience that you have because of your age leading people. So I think all of us, so I was a millennial leader before we had millennials, I was, I guess, a baby boomer. No, I would be a Gen X leader, but my leadership was in the 80s, 40, well, I'm dating myself, maybe 30 years ago, I guess. In my early 20s, I was a leader managing people that are much older than me. And I was a terrible leader. I was not a good leader. So I think my advice would be to use your people around you. A couple of other pieces are, especially for those of us, and I include myself in this because I'm quite millennial in how I function. I love technology. I love random things. I love Facebook, Instagram, social media, and I'm addicted to it, I think. So a couple of things. Especially, when we're leading in a crisis like we are now, is seek credible information, not social media. I think that's very, very, very important. The stuff that's going on the planet related to the pandemic, most of it is not grounded in science, and so if you don't believe in science about the pandemic, then I guess you probably don't ever go to doctors, so it's just not credible strategic thinking, right? So I think there's that. I think we need to make decisions without all the information, and that can sometimes be hard for all leaders, is to be able to make decisions without all the information. I think we want to ask questions to help people move through a crisis. We don't just have to have answers. When we're under pressure, all of us think we have to have the answers. Sometimes it's just about asking the right questions about how can I help? Get out of your office if you're in an office. If you're on virtual, like many of us are now, do team chats, do chew-in chats. I've met people who are doing chew-in chats. Some of them do drinks and tea at 5 p.m. on Fridays at the end of their work days. The other advice I'd give to leaders at this point, which, I've had to do myself, is the importance when we're in a crisis like we are now, regardless of whether you're a millennial leader or not. But again, millennial leaders may not have as much experience. Still think they are great leaders and can be great leaders without experience. So first off, let me say that, is to dedicate resources now for future crisis planning. And that can feel counterintuitive because we're in the middle of one now, but I'm like, I have to think we're probably hopefully not have another pandemic in our lifetime. Let's hope not. But we need to, the skills we've learned now, we can really take forward, I think. So dedicate resources for future planning.
Wow, that was really well elucidated, Greg. Loved it.
Thank you too much.
No, it was perfect, and the pieces of advice were also really valuable. And I agree with the fact that you should not compartmentalize leaders into millennials or baby boomers. Automatically, we tend to associate certain stereotypes. So, thoroughly agree with you.
Good.
So, just to kind of wrap this interview up, Greg, do you have any passing remarks that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I'll leave you with what I think has been a theme of mine for years. And again, it's something I've learned. Whether I'm speaking to a group of 1,000 people or leading a workshop of 20, there's always lots of information, that happens. And even an interview like this, we've shared a lot of information, you and I. And I think it can be overwhelming for all of us when there's so much going on out there and there's so much to read. We're listening to podcasts or we attend sessions. And, my advice for people is not to get overwhelmed with everything that's going on. And when you listen to a podcast like this, just pick one simple little thing that you want to practice. Maybe it is next time it's a crappy day outside. Maybe it's removing the emotion from the language. Maybe when you get a crappy report, maybe it's just dialing it down a bit and being very clear about what is actually wrong with it. So, pick something simple to practice. Otherwise, this will just be another podcast that you listen to and went, oh, that was nice. We had a good conversation. Wasn't that fun? Well, that's not why I do this. And I know that's not why you do this at peopleHum. You want people to take something away. So my advice to every single person listening, if you heard something of interest in here, that interests you, pick something simple and just practice it. You won't remember everything. And it's when you practice it, you build your change muscles to handle things. The other piece I will leave you with is this. Look at what one new skill or practice that you have learned in the last year since the start of this pandemic that you did not have before. Because that has been the good thing that has come from this. If there's one good thing, and again, not minimizing all the awful things, is that we all have a new set of skills and practices that we did not have a year ago. So identify what yours is, because it's going to help you as you move forward in your career. Because what I know is this, it's the magic of daily changes that will make the biggest difference in the quality of your life. So thank you for having me.
Wow, that was lovely, and love the last inspirational bit from your end. Thank you so much, Greg. I'm sure our audience are greatly going to benefit from this interview, and I had a wonderful time. And I mean, the takeaways from this interview, I'm really going to try my best and put it into practice.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.